In that instant, Shelian's eyes bulged. Never in his life had anyone treated him this way before. First, no one dared. Second, no one could. However, this person was swift like the devil and appeared so suddenly that before he even had the chance to defend himself, he'd fallen into such a state. Freaking out, he was flustered and his limbs were thrashing, desperately trying to push the other away. Instead, he choked on large mouthfuls of water, gurgling out strings of bubbles like crystal water beads from his mouth. This was a big no-no underwater. Thus, the hand around his waist held him tighter, their bodies pressed closer together, and Shelian's struggling hands were firmly folded and crushed against his own chest, unable to move. His lips were still securely sealed, the kiss deepening, and a stream of gentle, chilled air slowly passed through. Dumbfounded and helpless, as he began to accept his fate, Shelian finally saw clearly the face of this person. It was Hua Cheng. The moment he realized it was Hua Cheng, he stopped struggling, and numerous random thoughts popped into his mind, all inappropriate for the time and place. Such as, so it was Hua Cheng, no wonder he's cold. Ghosts don't need to breathe, but he can still deliver air to me. Don't ghosts sink in water? Just then, Hua Cheng suddenly opened his eyes. To be staring into those dark eyes at such a close distance, Shelian instantly froze, and soon after he started struggling again, his arms flailing, like a duck so dumb and awkward it was drowning itself. The flailing arms were easily stopped by Hua Cheng, and with his arms still firmly around Shelian's waist, he took him and speedily swam toward the surface. It didn't take long before the two broke through the surface. The waters were freezing and the air was cold too. Shelian's whole body was burning up. The moment they floated to the top, Shelian wanted to run away, but that cloud of black smoke was still swarming above the water, watching with predatory eyes. When it saw someone emerge, it immediately locked onto them and flashed forward. Shelian only turned his head a little bit before Hua Cheng pulled him back with a hand behind his head. Their lips hadn't separated for even a second before they were pressed tightly against each other once more. Shelian's lips were aching and numb from the kiss, feeling as if he was going to lose his senses. If this was anyone else, he would have long since stabbed him with his sword. But this just had to be Hua Cheng. He was completely at a loss on what to do, his tears ready to fall from distress. Just then, beyond Hua Cheng's face, he saw thousands of silver butterflies break through the water next to them. Accompanied by a sharp thrill, that thick rain of butterflies shot out from the surface like bullets, their wings reflecting a cold glare, sharp like blades. Within moments, that child spirit screamed from the slashing. The black smoke dispersed, and it tried to flee in all directions. However, the web of those butterflies enveloped from the earth to the heavens, sealing the smoke within. No matter how much it rammed and pounded, it couldn't break through. Hua Cheng's eyes had never lifted even once, and with Shelian in his embrace, they once again dove into the waters. After a while, the two lips finally parted. Once separated, another stream of air bubbles spewed from Shelian's mouth, and Hua Cheng freed a hand, tossing out dice. The dice actually spun in the water, rapidly too. They spun out a strong, whirling current before finally stilling. Afterward, the two once again broke through the water surface. This time, the shore was not far away, and only then did Hua Cheng bring Shelian to swim over. Who knows what shore it was? There were lights and voices of crowds, seemingly close yet far away. Behind them, over the water, that troop of butterflies shot into the sky with that cloud of black smoke in their captivity. They flew toward the faint lights in the distance, leaving behind a trail of long wails from the child's spirit. Mum. The two of them climbed ashore, sitting heavily on the ground. Looking at each other thus, Shilin was finally able to take a good look at Hua Cheng. In reality, the two of them had only parted ways for just a few days, but Shilin felt like it had been a long time since they had last met. Every time they met, Hua Cheng looked good in different ways. The Hua Cheng this time seemed to be older by a couple of years compared to the last time. His face had always been handsome, shimmering brighter than the water. His locks were exceedingly black, his skin extremely white, and on the right side of his cheek was a very thin, small braid, a red string threading through it intricately. This was the first time Shilin realized that above Hua Cheng's forehead was a widow's peak, and it made his face look even more shapely and alluring. The black eye patch that covered an eye emitted traces of killing aura, softening that refined charm, making his good looks reach an almost perfect balance. Hua Cheng's brows were knitted, as if trying to hold back. After panting softly a few times, he opened his mouth to speak, his voice distinctly lower than before. "Your Highness," he said. From the hair on his head to all over his body, Shilin's entire person was dripping with water. His lips were swollen, his eyes blank. It was only after a good moment of disoriented daze before he mumbled, I. His stammering eyes continued, before suddenly he randomly blurted out, "I'm a little hungry." Hearing this, Hua Cheng was taken aback. Shilin hadn't yet recovered from the shock, and said, in a state of jumbled mess, "No, I'm a little sleepy." He flipped around, his back facing Hua Cheng, and bent down to his knees, his hands touching the ground, fumbling as if looking for something. Behind him, Hua Cheng asked, "What are you looking for?" Shilin didn't dare to look at him, and said incoherently, "I'm looking for a thing. I'm looking for my bamboo hat. Where's my bamboo hat?" If it was anyone else watching the scene play out, they would certainly yell, "He's done for. He's gone stupid." But in reality, it was only because Shilin had never experienced something like this before, and the shock was too great, making him lose it a little. Shilin crawled on his hands and knees, shuffling away with his back still facing Hua Cheng, mumbling, I can't find it. I'm leaving now. I'm going home to eat. I need to go collect some scraps now." "I'm sorry," Hua Cheng said. Feeling that the voice behind him was coming closer, Shilin jumped to his feet and cried, "I'm leaving now." This cry was like a cry for help, and Hua Cheng hastily said, "No." Shilin hurriedly tried to run away, but within a few steps out, his foot twisted, and he fell back onto the ground. Looking back, there was a trail of blood behind him. That needle deeply embedded in the bottom of his foot was completely stuck in. Hua Cheng immediately seized his ankle, his voice alarmed. "What's wrong?" he asked. Shilin immediately tried to pull his leg back. Nothing. It doesn't hurt at all. It's fine," he said. Hua Cheng was slightly angered. "How can it not hurt?" he yelled. Then his hands moved. He was actually going to remove Shilin's boot. Terrified, Shilin crawled forward again, exclaiming as he crawled, No, there's no need." He kept crawling, trying to scamper. Hua Cheng held on to him, stopping him from doing so. It was a complete pandemonium, and it finally alerted everyone else on the shore. A roaring crowd, chattering and blabbering, A large group of who knows what kind of weirdos all came to surround them, clamoring, shouting, "Who goes there? How dare? Don't you know what this place is? Are you done with life, or did you want to die again? Ain't this my lord?" The crowd of ghosts immediately hollered in unison, "Good day, your lordship." Sheldon let out a wail in his head, wishing desperately that he could cover his face with his hands. This was the ghost city. There were quite a number of ghosts in the crowd that he remembered seeing from the last time he came by. Sheldon even saw a familiar hog's head. Sheldon and Hua Cheng were drenched from head to toe, surrounded by countless humans and ghosts alike, watching them. And Hua Cheng still had his hand on Sheldon's ankle, not letting go. This was such a shocking scene that it finally snapped Sheldon out of it. But who knew that once the crowd of ghosts recognized Hua Cheng, they became even more excited, shouting, "My lord, are you trying to capture someone? Do you need help? We'll help you hold them down." "Scram," Hua Cheng ordered. That group of ghosts hastily left, but even if they watched from afar, not daring to come close, Sheldon still wanted to just pass out and end everything, because Hua Cheng had risen to his feet, then bent down and gently swept him up into his arms. He walked with heavy steps to leave the shore. Sheldon was still dressed in woman's clothing and could only be grateful that the pillow was no longer stuffed in his belly. Otherwise, it would paint an even more terrifying picture. However, the frightful thought finally brought him completely back to the present. He struggled a bit in Hua Cheng's arms, but didn't succeed, so he cleared his throat softly. "Sun Lung," he said, "I'm sorry. I sort of lost it just now. How embarrassing." What had happened just then was really too great of a shocking blow for him. The word blow was harsh, but this was his first time after all. However, it wasn't only just because it was his first time. In the many centuries past, it wasn't like there weren't any seductive women ghosts who tried to tempt him with their naked bodies, but Sheldon had never reacted this embarrassingly before. So why did he descend into such a state now? He could only guess that it must be because Guan had only ever taught him how to defend against women, but not against men. He had no experience, which was why he hadn't known how to react. Thinking back on the way he'd conducted himself, Sheldon was slightly ashamed and felt that he had maybe overreacted. He thought Sun Lung meant well, but Sheldon had ended up scarring him to this point. Truly, he was being too impolite. Hua Cheng, however, replied, "Nothing of the sort. I was the one who crossed the line and offended Gurga. Sun Lung is in the wrong and apologizes." Seeing that he didn't take anything to heart, Sheldon secretly let out a breath of relief. Sheldon said, "I was in dire straits and you were only trying to help. It wasn't really a big deal anyway." Oh, that's right. He suddenly remembered what he was doing. "Sun Lung, why have you suddenly appeared again? Where's that child spirit?" Hua Cheng, however, replied in an authoritative tone, "Treating your wounds comes first." During their exchange, the two had already arrived before a magnificent building. When Sheldon looked up, upon the entrance hung the title, Paradise Manor. He was astonished. Had that burnt Paradise Manor really been rebuilt this fast? And it looked exactly the same as the old one. Yet, with a guilty conscience, Sheldon was too embarrassed to ask about it. Hua Cheng entered, carrying him in his arms, and mounted that black jaded divan. Sheldon sat on the divan, and Hua Cheng himself half knelt below, holding Sheldon's injured foot, checking the tiny puncture dyed by blood underneath. The position made Sheldon feel uncomfortable, He cried, "No!" and made a move to get down, but Hua Chang pushed him back, swiftly removing his boot with his hand. This foot also happened to be the one with the cursed shackle, a deep black chain locked around that clean white ankle, a powerful contrast. Hua Chang's eyes only lingered for a moment on that soft ankle before his palm pressed against Shilian's injury. "This might hurt a bit," Hua Chang said. "Don't hold back, Gogo. Cry out if it hurts."